but now I'm found.
I have abandoned my child.
This is the scene that won this guy an Oscar, but in my opinion, it's not the best scene in the movie. That one actually happens even earlier. The famous 2007 film is not just a movie where a guy may or may not have abandoned his child, but a deep psychoanalysis of a sociopath. Following the life of character Daniel Plainview, we gain insight on an ambitious, paranoid oilman's life from the late 1800s to 1940s, I think. He despises everyone around him and uses his status to gain more power. The first act alone is able to say so much and so little at the same time. Combined with excellent cinematography and a great score, this haunting epic seeps tension like oil from the ground of a certain Texas ranch. Not only is Daniel Plainview the unstoppable force driving the plot, but in the first act, his every thought is conveyed through various means. Be that sound, lighting, or his actions.
Your help with this, Eli.
Creating an immersion unlike any movie I've ever seen. See what I did there? Before we get into the scene, I wanted to show some cool things the film does that contribute to what makes the scene so great later. Spoilers, obviously. And the particular scene, or really sequence, that elevates the first act of the film was built in a compounding crescendo of events, all occurring after the fall. For an example of a narrative technique that the film does throughout the movie, it does especially well in the beginning. Just listen. It's so quiet. Combine this with the vast landscapes and the dead color palette, you get a serious feeling of isolation. Sure, I added music, and the music adds to that too. It's an amazing score, but just alone, it's done so well. Daniel Plainview is out here, and he just fell, and if he wasn't able to get out of that hole, he would have definitely died there. And we'll see that point proven plenty of times. And the reason they open the movie with his fall is integral to the way show versus tell is used. He is isolated, alone, and fueled by pure ambition to see his goal achieved, even in the most hostile environment. See, all of that was observed in the first few minutes of the film, but they were never stated explicitly. In fact, nothing was stated. Not until this scene at 1450.
Ladies and gentlemen, if I say I'm an oil man, you will agree.
But there is still something the first act perfected to warrant this video. A quick rundown of the plot before the scene. Daniel and his adopted child build an oil harvesting business, and with the help of a certain priest discover some ripe land. They quickly move to buy all the surrounding acres and erect a full-blown oil rig. Well, not quite that full-blown. To bless the construction and further, no one said, to serve as thanks for finding the oil, the priest requested his name be mentioned during the unveiling. The unease surrounding this character is clear, so Daniel uses Mary as a prop to win over the townspeople instead. Daniel uses children as props to get what he wants. Makes me wonder. Oil. On a lighter note, Mary Sunday is now spared from her father's abuse under Daniel's new presence in town.
No more hitting, right? No more hitting.
But all is not well. After a night of drinking, Daniel is awakened to learn that one of his men was just killed in the rig only the night after opening. Maybe Daniel should have granted the pastor his wish. Thinking on this, he visits the pastor's church the next day to hear the pastor preach of a vision he had the night before, dressed completely in black. He says many strange things that some might simply consider a part of the time, maybe a time period thing to where the actor's playing it up and being extra extravagant. And this is in part due to the pastor trying to win over the people, but I think there is more. The story follows Daniel's perspective, making the actual imagery itself a bit unreliable. So if he is weirded out or disgusted by the preacher in the church, it makes sense that the movie might skew the actions, the words, the visuals in order to further convey Daniel's train of thought instead of what's actually happening. But either way, Daniel's impressed and contemplates how the preacher has control of these people with a look of respect on his face, like that was pretty good, like he did in an earlier conversation.
That's good.
Furthering this rivalry, Their opposing views clash outside the church, and Daniel learns that the church is expanding. He is losing the people. His several public speeches are maintaining his reputation amongst the townspeople, but it's not certain for how much longer that will last. And then finally, we have arrived. The scene opens with a shot of the oil rig. It's a nice day. The new church has undergone construction and Daniel Plainview sits outside his office observing. The rig seems to be running fine until shortly after the machinery of the oil rig starts rumbling ominously as the rig takes on increasing pressure. It shakes more and more as the pressure builds. Suddenly, high pressure gas explodes from the derrick, throwing HW back. Daniel immediately hears and rushes over, searching for HW. Following the blast, a massive geyser of oil erupts, shooting up the structure and raining down. Daniel and another worker save HW, but the concussion from the blast leaves his ears ringing. He rushes HW to the nearest building as the industrial score kicks in. Daniel tries to ascertain his adopted son's injury, but all he gets is...
I can hear a voice.
Something is wrong with him, but Daniel doesn't know what. No time to think about it though, as the rig erupts in flames, shooting up through the top. Daniel is forced to abandon, not yet, and rushes back to the fire to undo the support cable so the structure can fall. Smoke billows out over the sun-setting sky above. Despite HW's condition, he makes this comment.
What are you looking so miserable about? There's a whole ocean of oil under our feet.
He stands enamored with the flame, watching the rig burn, symbolizing his passion reignited as the darkness surrounds him, his face covered in crude oil, isolated from anyone. The glare from the fire creating an intense vignette around the edges of the lens. His son can't hear, workers scrambling for help, chaos surrounded him on all sides. But he struck oil. This is where the movie shines brightest, a turning point and climactic ending to the first act. If the fall in the cave was a rebirth, then this is an apotheosis for Daniel Plainview, and he will stop at nothing to achieve his goal. Tension is what hooks us into a story, but There Will Be Blood is able to capture the audience so impressively because it writes subplots like main storylines. What if we ended a major plotline in the first act? Well, then the movie ends. So let's make it a subplot. Each subplot and character is so interesting they could have their own movie, but none as interesting as the main character that we choose. So the goal is, if you're gonna have other characters in it, they cannot be more interesting than the main character. That's writing 101. Your main character is the most interesting character in the story, which in this case, he definitely is. Each subplot and character is so interesting they could have their own movie, but none as interesting as the main character we choose. The only struggles Daniel is left with for his oil tycoon is finding someone to buy the oil.
One night, I'm gonna come to you inside of your house, wherever you're sleeping, and I'm gonna cut your throat.
Which leads to the next act of the story involving his brother, HW, the pastor, and the church scene. This act is very close to being as good as the first, but the reason I didn't give it the edge is because, in my opinion, starting stories and ending them is much harder than doing the parts in the middle. Shout out writers. The second act is so good because it is able to wrap up the entertaining plot lines, not this guy, oh my god, in an entertaining way. I'll break down some of the missed points about this movie I've often seen that make a lot more sense on a second viewing. The three acts in this movie each serve as a type of story individually, the one preceding acting like an epilogue. Normally movies don't do this. A few plot lines carry throughout the entire movie, but good movies have a central plot with interweaving stories that are resolved but create more. There Will Be Blood may be the best example of this ever, of all time, the GOAT. For example, the growing distance between HW and Daniel is portrayed in a number of ways, starting with HW not being allowed outside, being distant since he became mute, and Daniel going back to his old method of dealing with HW by just giving him alcohol in his milk, subduing him. Whether or not this was common in the late 1800s, early 1900s is another topic, but it shows Daniel resorting to not trying to communicate anymore. He just wants HW to listen and follow what he says so he can grow his oil tycoon more, be more efficient as a businessman. Remember, this is Daniel's paranoid point of view, so he sees the divide as HW turning against him, even though HW still loves him. This is proven later and culminates in the second act when, after the imposter brother joins the story, HW recognizes him and tries to kill him, but his naivety almost kills Daniel too. He basically tries to set the imposter brother on fire in a small cottage with many flammable curtains and stuff just around everywhere. So when this inevitably fails and Daniel wakes up, he thinks HW is betraying him actively and trying to assassinate him, as all the other people in his life do, obviously. This is a self-contained little plot introducing an imposter brother subplot to weave with HWs, but the overarching HW plot that started in the first ends in the third. In a bitter conversation, though not as exciting, part of the reason I don't like the third act as much as the other two. From Daniel's point of view, his thoughts of distrust and suspicion are proved basically because he believes them into fruition. HW tries to help him in a dumb way, but Daniel took it as a betrayal. Looking at bad movies and shows with boring subplots, anything but the main character doing the main story thing seems boring, especially when it doesn't really have to do with the story. Common examples I've seen are romantic subplots. Like, I'm not trying to see some random love story blossom in the middle of this, I don't know, apocalypse. It just doesn't make sense, especially when it doesn't affect the plot at all. Like, they love each other. Awesome. Now the plot can move forward. But when a subplot is connected to the main story, you can point out where the main timeline shifts because of the subplot line. A general rule in writing, this is YouTube writing. Okay, I get my writing advice from YouTube. I don't go to writing workshops or anything like that. A general rule is when explaining the story, have as few ands as possible. So for example, like, he ran after the ship and jumped in, and then there was a huge volcano, and then the plane crashed, and then the big bad guy turns into a big monster, and then the main character punches a boulder in. You see what I mean? Versus, let's use There Will Be Blood as the example here. Daniel builds an oil tycoon with his son, but his son goes deaf. So the imposter brother has never ratted out by the boy when he recognizes it. Then the boy makes a mistake trying to act on that instinct he had, seeing that the brother was an imposter, and he makes a mistake which gets him sent away because Daniel is paranoid. But this leads to, you know, the church scene and all this other stuff. He's abandoned his child. I've abandoned my child. Yada yada, you guys get the point. I could dive into every subplot and plot of the movie, but for now I'm gonna keep it simple and just focus on the first act. That's what the point of this video was. If you guys wanna see me break down another movie completely, please let me know, probably an art video next. Thank you for watching, like and sub.